very end of your report, something about the intent of the ratios, that there was a purpose for it in the beginning, and that it really wasn't something that was intended to carry on throughout. So could you just repeat that?
Certainly, through the chair. What I said was that tax ratios were intended to settle the starting point for tax reform in 1998. So prior to that, farms were taxed at the residential rate, and a farmer then applied for a 75% farm tax rebate. And so with the elimination of business tax, farm tax rebates, and ratios were set to be the starting point for tax reform. So setting them at 25% essentially replaced taxing you at 100% and applying for a 75% rebate. I don't believe, in my opinion, that they were ever intended to be used to adjust tax burden as a result of CVA. If the system changed to a market value reassessment as the basis for consistent assessment across the province, and the ratios were implemented consistently across the province, and then you move forward. In any given reassessment, certain classes may go up, others may go down. Like anything else, whether it's RSPs fluctuating, you ride it out. Things change, economic times change, markets change. But and as I said, last reassessment or the ones before, I took a lot of phone calls from waterfront property owners in Norfolk County who saw very increased assessments in the residential class, and it was simply based on sales of cottages of waterfront properties. So I guess going back to your question, yeah, the ratios were the starting point of tax reform, and I don't believe they were intended to be adjusted each time there's a reassessment and it affects a certain class a certain way.
Thanks for that. And just who actually, that was a program, provincial program at one time that was paid for by the province, was it not? Like the 75% subsidy.
Through the chair, I believe it was through Ministry of Agriculture. And
okay, so it'd be the province.
Yeah.
And somehow it got shifted or downloaded to the municipality, and now it's the local taxpayers in each municipality that pays for that 75% subsidy.
Through the chair, yes, but I believe it was subsidized through, there was some funding that came back through municipalities. I can't off the top of my head think of what the program was, but I think the municipalities were compensated somehow from the province for that.
Yeah, maybe for like a one-off, and then you're on your own. So these tax ratios are still in there, both for commercial, as I remember the Harris government trying to, and I probably deal with Toronto commercial, it was out of whack, and trying to get that into a range of fairness or something, and those formulas are still there that could be applied to commerce as well, which pays close to 3 times as much as the residential rate. So if they're really not being used, and like the report says, the commercial range of fairness and shifting of commercial rate, we haven't used them at all. Why don't we just get rid of them? Why don't we take them right out? If they're not intended to be used beyond the initiation period, then can't we just get rid of them?
Through the chair, I think I need more clarification of the question. There is no.
Okay.
You have to have a ratio.
In the report.
You have to have a ratio for
yeah,
business.
in the report. Okay, it says you can do 2 things. It says you can shift commercial, right, to a range of fairness. Right? So in other words, you can take all the commercial assessments and bring them down, which would be another shift over to everybody else. And that was implemented by the Harris government in, I don't know, 1995 or 8 or whatever it was. But the report says we've never used that. So there's a mechanism for shifting rates, and then we have the second mechanism for shifting rates with the farm. And it says you can shift from 0.25 lower, but you can't go back up once you go down. So my question is, because we've never done it, and the intent isn't to do it on an ongoing basis, why do we have it there at all?
Through the chair, the range of fairness was put in exactly like that. It's a range of fairness, and municipalities had a ratio that was above the range of fairness. And if it was that ratio, particularly in that chart for multi-residential, if that ratio was over 2%, then we're not allowed to actually raise the levy for the multi-residential. So that's what that last column means in that report. The range of fairness, which is the first column, we could definitely go into that range of fairness with multi-residence, commercial and industrial. However, once we do that, then the burden is obviously going to be shifted 80% of it, whatever that difference is, to the residential tax class. And once you get into that range of fairness, you can't go back. So this sort of goes to what Mr. Mayor's question was earlier as far as the 25%. If we're outside that range of fairness, which we are in a couple of our tax classes, and we go into that range of fairness, we can't go back to where we were. But we have the flexibility within that range of fairness to do whatever we want with the ratios. With the farm, we can adjust the farm down to 22% if that's what we decide on, and we can go back to 25% as well, because it's within that range, right? 0 to 25% on the chart. Having said all that, in my professional opinion, we shouldn't be doing that every time we have a tax year. It creates inconsistencies, and it takes away from MPAC's mission, I guess you can say, to have fair taxes with everybody based on market value.
Sounds to me that if you really wanted to start tinkering with any rate, whether it's farm or commercial, then you might as well just go back to square one and design a whole new method of taxation. Because it's, the whole idea is based on market value. So is there such a thing as a different model that would address the concerns of commercial paying close to 3 times too much, or the farm rate wanting to go down further? Is there another method to address that?
Through the chair, no, there is no other model. There's acts that are passed on what we legislatively have to do, but there is some flexibility there with this range of fairness. However, keep in mind, every time you shift something from something other than residential, the residents will get the burden of that shift.
Okay, so, and just lastly then, I thought at one time we did try to, or did shift the commercial a little bit at the beginning of amalgamation. I know your report says it doesn't, but it seems that the council wasn't aware of the shift, and once they were made aware, they stopped doing it. That was my recollection. Maybe I was dreaming, I don't know. That would have been back in 2001 or 2002 or 2003. So I think it was a wake-up call to this council that anytime you shift something, it goes to the residents, and they make up the largest majority of the population of Norfolk County.
Okay, Councillor Height, Councillor Brunton, Councillor Columbus, Mayor Luke, Jim Oliver, and John Wells.
Thank you,
Councillor
Chairman Geisens. Through you to staff, when I look at some of the figures here and you look at the increases in land values and then basically the tax burden or the amount of revenue the county brings in, there seems to be, I don't know, it doesn't seem to have a rhyme or reason. Like if I look on commercial properties on page 6, you can see those property values have risen $30 million. Yet when I look at the tax burden, it's actually down. So they pay less taxes this year than they did last year. And I can see that the range that you used for the CVA estimates are from 2012 to 2016, but how can that be explained? Or am I reading that incorrectly? Like 2016, it was $7.9 million for the levy, and now it's $7.8 million. Table 3.
Through the chair, what that's showing, it's table 4, I think you're referring to on page 5? Table 3? Table 5. I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? I was looking at table 5 when you were asking your question. Can you repeat your question?
I can. How did commercial properties end up going up $30 million from 2012 to 2016, but from 2016 to 2017, they actually see a reduction in the levy? If you look in table 3, last year they paid $7.9 million, and this year it'll be $7.8 million. They're not the only one. Multi-residence is down as well.
Through the chair, that all boils down to the reassessment for that year. And we would have to investigate what commercial activity has lost assessment versus ones that have increased assessment. So in that chart, the commercial assessment did drop from one year to the next, and therefore their burden is lower. Or what could have happened is the residential assessments went up, and therefore they're getting more of the burden of the tax levy. There's many factors that could result in the numbers that you see in front of you.
Right, and that's where I guess it's a bit confusing, because even with our industrial land, in those 4 years before, the value only rose $5 million, and that seems low to me if you would consider the rest of properties, in that the additional tax that they pay is only $32,000. Is it that we're losing industrial land?
Through the chair, that it could be that we're losing it, or it's switched classes from industrial full to industrial vacant. But any number of things, like the assessment goes up, goes down, but there's a good chance that the industrial has more decreased than it has increased from an assessment perspective, which turns into tax dollars less for industrial.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last one, I guess, is like the farmland itself. From those 4 years has risen $1 billion. That seems excessive. If you look on table 1, is that not $1.5 billion in 2012 going up to $2.5 billion in 2016? That's the value. And for that value, the farm gets to pay an extra $634,000 from this year to last year. Again, in table 3. And we're not shifting the burden?
Through the chair, sorry, when you say we're not shifting the burden, what do you mean by that?
In 1 year alone, those values from 2016 to 2017, farmers for their farmland will be paying $634,000 more combined. And that's just based on the increase from 1 year in the property? I don't have the CVA estimates from 2016 to 2017, but that seems very excessive. I do understand it's a $2.5 billion land value we have out there, but...
Through the chair, that's a correct assessment, and that's through MPAC's review of various assessments, and with the farmland, as the presentation showed, their value better reflects the marketability of the land. And that is, in essence, the Assessment Act is your piece of the pie, mine, for lack of better words, is based on the market value of your property.
Okay, I hope their crops go up 65.38%, but I doubt it. Now, for industrial, and I'm sorry, the whole threshold range, why is it set at like a 2.63? This is table 2. And its current and proposed tax ratio is 1.69, but it has a threshold of 2.63. But the range of fairness stops at 1.1, so are we over and can't change that range?
Through the chair, so the 2.63 is, if we had, so the middle column is our ratios, Norfolk County's ratios. And if, using industrial as an example, if our ratio was 3, for example, it's over the threshold range. So therefore, legislatively, we would not be allowed to increase their tax levy. Fortunately, we're not over the threshold range because that sounds like it would be administratively difficult to do. So our ratio for industrial is 1.6929, and that, yes, is over the range of fairness. So if council decided to go within the range of fairness for industrial, we would have to go somewhere between 0.6 and 1.1. The result of that would shift the burden, and then we would have to live with it because we're outside of that range of fairness. Once we go in, you can't get out.
So how did we get out?
Through the chair, the best way to put that is we grandfathered it.
And now I noticed there is no threshold range for pipelines, so we don't have to be fair to them?
Through the chair, maybe I should have been more specific. Those are set. There's no discretion. That's why it's legislated what it will be. The farmland and the managed forest has to be at least 25, could go lower. And I don't believe there's any discretion to change the pipeline.
That's too bad. I don't think many of them vote. Thank you.
Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on page 8 of our agenda, page 4 of your report there, Sue. I'm on table 2. I'm a little confused there. The range in fairness, where is that? Who sets that?
Through the chair, that's from the province.
Okay. And we have several that are above the range of fairness, correct?
That's correct.
What do you, is a duplex multi-residential?
No, a
What's
multi-res, I believe, is 6 or more units.
6 or more. Okay. So if you had a 6-unit apartment worth $600,000 and a single-family home worth $100,000, that's the assessed value, right? So do you multiply that rate by that assessed value? Is it safe to say that?
The ratio, no. In simple terms, if you want to say a $100,000 house times 1% or a $100,000 6-unit apartment times $1.69, basically apples to apples, the multi-res pays $1.69, where the residential pays $1.
But the sixplex, I'll call it, is worth $600,000.
The sixplex, my way of interpreting it with looking at these ratios is that multi-residential, meaning 6+ is like a commercial operation, just as commercial or industrial. It's not a personal home. And I believe that's why they're set the way they are. It's more like a business operation than it is personal dwellings.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, when I look at it, I can see why some commercial and industrial it may be are those current, on that, it says current tax ratios that we use, how would they compare, say, the industrial one to other industrial ratios around, say, Brant, Haldeman and that? Are they in line?
Through the chair, as the treasurer just told me, he's familiar with Haldeman's, and we're lower than Haldeman. I do know that one goal of municipalities is to try to get the commercial and industrial close together. Ours are the same, so if that's a goal, we've met that goal. But, I'd have to do some checking and do some surveys, but as the treasurer said, our neighbor Haldeman has higher ratios than we do.
I just wonder what the average would be across the province, but and as far as the pipelines, is there not an appeal against us on the pipeline issue? Didn't I read that someplace, Council? And I can see why. I mean, they're double what the range of fairness is. That makes sense, I guess. They got a good chance on an appeal. Would they not have? Like this range of fairness, does it hold any water per se?
Through the chair, an assessment appeal is on the market value assessment. It's not they're not appealing the ratio or their tax rate. They would be appealing the value that's been assigned to the pipeline.
Well, but in essence, it comes back to if we're charging them at 1.48 and we use 0.7 as the highest range of fairness, I mean, it's all money in the end, right?
Well, no, because the assessment is going to be appealed with MPAC and the ARB, and it's going to be based on the value of the pipeline. That's what we charge here, but it's my understanding that it's pipeline appeals can encompass several municipalities. We're not all the same with our ratios, so it is the value of the pipeline that is under dispute. That's my understanding.
Well, it's interesting that this range of fairness, and this is the first time I've been aware of it, really, and when you look at it and you look at where we are with our current ratios, I guess it's safe to say we look after the residential and we look after the farmland. The rest pay the bill. That's kind of the way I look at it. So, thank you.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You asked for questions. I got one here. To Sue here, when we're competitive for industrial activity in the county, are we comparable to other municipalities in the tax ratio to attract this industry? Like if you took Brantford or Haldeman, are we comparable? Like,
Through the chair, I don't have the answer to that. I can do some research and get back to you. However, you have to keep in mind that in those larger cities, the assessment is there as well for those industries and for the commercial, where ours is heavily weighted to residential and farm.
great. Thanks. If you got some information on it, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Luke.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation in this report. Could I speak to it as well?
Yes.
Well, in all due respect, I think we're beating this thing to death. It's an important issue, no doubt. When your assessment goes up, regardless of what you own, when your assessment goes up, your taxes are going to go up, whether it's farmland, whether it's your residence, whether it's your cottage, whether it's a commercial endeavor, whatever. That's what our assessment is based on, is how our taxes are based on. So, I understand that farmland in Norfolk County has risen, but, Mr. Chair, on table 3, 7 categories, 5 have increased this year over last year, 2 have not, the multi-residential and the commercial. Yes, as Councillor Hyde has pointed out, farmland is paying an extra $634,000. Residential property owners are paying an additional $2.2 million over last year. The problem in lowering any one of those categories is who's going to pick it up. The burden will be on the residential. So I'm certainly willing to just leave it alone for 2017 as the same ratios as last year. Thank you.
2 more speakers, Councillor Oliver and then Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is a very simple one, and I know I see it, but I just want to reaffirm with staff. And again, I'm also looking at table number 3. I think the mayor just referred to it. And even assuming we leave things as they are, as per staff's recommendation, the farmland in our county will be paying 5.63% of our total tax levy. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, as compared to 9.89% for commercial and obviously 79.66% for residential.
Through the chair, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Wells.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, before I begin to ask my question, could I just take this moment to say thank you very much to the presenter. Mr. Chair, I find this hard to believe. I almost understood every word he said, which is quite a feat. So congratulations and thank you very much. I also thank the mayor for putting the motion on the floor. I think he is correct. We know we have a little problem, but this question goes to Sue. Sue, when the residents complained about their high waterfront prices going up and up and up and up, and how unfair that was, did we lower their rates?
Through the chair, no, we did not.
And why didn't we?
I don't know that they asked. They're lumped in with residential. The waterfront are residential, so it's the market value.
And I think that's the key. It goes back to somebody has to pay, and once we start monkeying around, Mr. Chair, somebody else has to pick up the tab. And what you win in the bananas sometimes, you lose in the grapes.
Councillor Black and then Height.
Yes, I'm going to support the motion that's on the floor. I think this is, the 18th year we've debated this, and the results usually come out about the same, and the comments are about the same. We have an assessment model. It's called market value assessment. It's a method of trying to fairly distribute the tax burden. It's not perfect, like anything, but as has been said, as soon as you start to tinker, then you're messing around with the whole concept of fair. We've got a model of fairness. We use it to fairly distribute the tax burden. And as soon as you start to mess around with it, then it goes somewhere else. And it looks like the residents will have to take the burden of it. I mean, it's the largest portion of our tax base, and they would have to pick it up. They already complain about high taxation, and we would have to explain again that, we're making you pay some more because the value of the farmland has gone up. I'm not so sure they would swallow that. And even if we did, I think it's a positive that farmland is going up. I mean, in terms of taxation for anybody, it's not really what you look forward to, paying more taxes, but knowing that the value of your property is going up. If somebody says, my property's gone from $400,000 to $500,000, oh, wow, I can make $100,000 more if I were to sell my property. Well, isn't it the same with the farmland? You know, and farmers are creating that increased value. We just heard it. Farmer to farmer sales. Farmers are increasing that value. So when a farmer sells, he has a windfall. And if he gets a reduced rate, do you think he'll come back and be knocking on Norfolk County's door to give us a share of the action? I don't think so. So leave well enough alone, and I support the motion on the floor.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, after reviewing these figures, I feel that industrial land is a bit of a weak spot for us. We haven't had a lot of growth in that area. And to answer Councillor Columbus's comment about are we cheaper than our neighbors, we certainly are. We had a report that came to TDAB before, and we're the cheapest game around as far as industrial. For me, what I'd like to see this county do is to concentrate on business expansion and attraction. If you're the cheapest game in town and you're not attracting the business, what's the problem? There's some kind of problem, and we need to woo these businesses to come into our community so that to help offset that. And further to the comments I heard earlier, the one advantage that the residential taxpayers have over the farmland is that residential housing grows. Farmland stays at the same capacity. Last year we had 244 houses, I believe, that helped add to the tax base, where the farmland itself did not grow in acreage. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. No further speakers. Mayor Luke has moved that report FS 17-21 property tax ratios be received as information, and that the 2017 tax ratios be set at multi-residential 1.6929, commercial 1.629, industrial 1.629, pipeline 1.4894, farmland 0.25, management forest 0.25, and further that a bylaw be passed to give effect to the above. All those in favor? That is carried. Deputations are at 5 o'clock, so we'll move on to some staff reports, unless you want to take a break. Want to take a break? Let's take a 10-minute break. I'll get it. Okay, we're back. Mr. Hines, your deputation, you have 10 minutes, and I will let you know when you have a minute to go.
Thank you very much indeed. So, Mr. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for allowing me to speak today. My name is David Hines. I live on Bluegrass Boulevard in Delhi. When I moved into that property, I was not aware at the time that a sidewalk was planned to be installed. After reviewing and looking exactly where this sidewalk was going to go, I'll be quite honest, I was really horrified. Basically, that the sidewalk was going to go 15 feet into the property. I thought it was going to go right by the road, or by the lamppost, or on the other side of the lamppost, but it's not. After speaking with the residents on Bluegrass Boulevard, I learned that many people also had no idea there was a planned walkway, and they certainly did not know where one was going to be positioned. Once they learned of the walkway was planned, most were, like myself, somewhat dismayed and were eager to sign a petition that I did present to them. I have highlighted most of the concerns of all the residents on both sides of the street on Bluegrass Boulevard and Cortlandt. Most of the people on that street do have multiple vehicles. Some have 4. And planning a sidewalk, I think, would create some dismay for not only in the wintertime for the plows going through, because they'd be forced to park on the road. And I've lived on roads where cars are parked and it's very, very hard to see. There are a lot of young children that live on that street, and they're actually on the opposite side to where the sidewalk's going to go, most of them. And it's a known fact that when you have parked vehicles and children playing, they can come out from behind a car very quickly and they can be injured or even killed. And for that, I want you to take that into great consideration after you've heard the rest of my speech. There are 2 OPP officers that actually do live. One lives on Bluegrass and the other one lives on Cortlandt, and we've had some discussion about that too. And they agreed with what I've said. So, understanding that there is an agreement between the developer and the county to develop, to install this sidewalk, and also probably the asphalt, I would imagine, that goes from the sidewalk to the street. So what we're asking for is an amendment to that agreement to eliminate the sidewalk completely. There's no other sidewalks in that subdivision, which is an older subdivision, but it's very attractive. And I think by putting just imagine your own home having a slab of concrete 1.5 meters wide, slapped almost virtually in the middle of your yard. Now, I did contact Mike Columbus, who's here today, and he actually came down and took a look, and he agreed that that was way far up on the property. It would actually make the aesthetics of the property, all that properties look absolutely horrible. A lot of people have planned to put in sprinkler systems, which obviously they cannot at the moment because they're not sure what's going on. So we implore you really as a community that, we do not think that this is needed. It would go from Cortlandt Street to down Bluegrass Boulevard and end at, I think it's Argyle Street there. So it'll end there and it'll end at Cortlandt, and that's it. And there's no other sidewalks in that subdivision at all. So personally, I just don't understand why there was one planned. Anyway, I think that now that you've heard what I've said, I think you really have to view it yourself to really understand and get an appreciation of that. But like I said, if you had one plunked in the middle of your yard, I think you'd not be very welcoming to have that done. So now that I've presented this, I do have the petition here.
Somebody
have
can
one?
bring
Oh,
that
okay.
up to the, we'll get it from you when you're done, okay?
Okay, yeah. So there's a couple of questions I have is Mike was very good at coming out and talking to me and helping me out. And it was actually Mike that said, you know, we have to get a petition, you have to come and speak. So that was fine. So the residents, most of them work very late. They don't get home, so that's why, you know, there's not a whole bunch of people sitting in the chairs. So I volunteer because I'm retired. But as regards to pedestrians in that area, there is really not a lot. And when they do go by, there's probably, I'm retired, so I'm always doing something in the garage, so I get to see a lot of people. I see maybe 4 people or 4 couples per day. That's it. So it's not a very heavy pedestrian walk area, no more than the rest of the subdivision. So a lot of people walk all the other streets at the same time, as I do with my 2 dogs. And I have no problem walking on the street whatsoever. But if for nothing else, I think for the safety of the kids, I think that, you know, if you really keep that in your forefront of your mind, when you do decide, you know, or vote on it, or whatever the next process is, which I'd like to know, what, after now I've delivered this speech, what is the process that will happen from this point on? And if it is come back as a negative, will I be allowed to address the council again and offer more objections if need be? So that's a question to you, sir.
Okay, that's something that council will have to decide, not myself. So anyway, is that the end of your?
Yes, it is. And thanks for listening to me.
Okay, questions? Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, did we get a map of where this is, or where exactly is Bluegrass? It's in Cortland.
No, it's not in Cortland.
Where is it?
No, it's in Delhi.
In Delhi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Why was I looking in Cortland?
Because one of the names of the street is Cortland.
Oh. Okay, that's good. Leo showed me.
Okay. Further, anyone else? Okay, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your presentation. We have these from time to time, of course. My only question to you, and I see all of the names on the petition, what percentage of residents on the street do these names represent?
About 99%.
99%, okay.
Yes.
So, because what we don't like to do, and I got caught once in my ward supporting a petition, and yet all of a sudden there were a whole bunch of people who were opposed to what the petitioners were asking for. You don't feel that's the case here?
No, I actually had people chasing me down the street to sign it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your deputation. I need a mover to receive the deputation as information. Councillor Sonnenberg, all those in favor? Thank you. You may sit down. Thank you. Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to make a movement of a recommendation that County Council waive the requirement for sidewalks in the Bluegrass Estates subdivision of Delhi. And I'll tell you my reasons. First of all, the sidewalk would go to nowhere. Sometimes you see a gate and it leads to nowhere, and it's called the gate to nowhere. Well, this sidewalk would be the sidewalk to nowhere because there's about 10 streets in between to the west that do not have a sidewalk. Everybody there walks on the road. And a lot of times the roadway is much cleaner than some of the sidewalks in Delhi, I know, and probably other communities across the county, because they get plowed and salted and sanded, whereas a lot of times sidewalks don't get kept up by the individuals that own property behind the sidewalk. In this situation here, it would bisect the driveways. There'd be a 10 or 12 foot section from the curb to the sidewalk that's proposed, where the people would have to cut the grass. They couldn't put sprinklers in there, I take it, because it would be county property. It's just bad planning. Now, I spoke to Public Works about this, and I guess the new bylaw that we have now in subdivision agreements is that the sidewalk is moved closer to the curb. I think it's 1 meter from the curb, if I'm not mistakenly. And in this one here, this subdivision agreement, I guess, was signed long before that took place. So hence, that's where the developer is putting the sidewalk. or proposed. Just wanted to say too that, yeah, I think Mr. Hines had mentioned to me that only one person did not sign the petition. And so that's my motion, my recommendation. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
The clerk has that down, I hope, and we'll continue on until we get through the list. Mayor Luke, you're next.
Well, I'm not sure where a motion like that would go.
Okay, well, that's something.
I mean, I'm not for a moment suggesting this can't be pursued, but we have a legal agreement signed between this corporation and a developer. And I'm not sure that one party and one party only can say, we're going to change something in that agreement. It doesn't work that way. I think the very least could happen is this council supports some sort of motion to approach the developer with a request to consider removing the sidewalk. That would be in order, but this council can't say, well, we're going to not allow something in agreement that we've signed and the other party has signed as well. And maybe our county manager or Ms. Robinson can comment on that, but this is a legal agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Lee, do you want to pitch in?
Certainly, through the chairman, to council, the mayor is correct. It is a legal agreement between ourselves and the developer, and council does not have the ability to arbitrarily change one of the terms and conditions without the concurrence of the developer. So a motion that would direct staff to pursue it with the developer may be in order, and that's something that can be done. I can say that the developer is well aware of the residents' concerns,